Wow, it is going to be a busy week next week. The time is 8:52 a.m. and it is March 29th. Welcome to another update from Great Lakes Weather. And we're going to be talking about a couple severe weather setups that we have coming up next week. I will not be able to chase these events. I'll be down in North Carolina with Samaritan's Purse next week. But I'm still going to roll out this video just to make sure that you guys are aware of exactly what's going to take place during these next set of events that will be happening next week. So we're going to dive right in, get started. Again, you've probably heard these well advertised in the news media, especially this one for Sunday. And then you're probably hearing ideas about this one coming up on Wednesday as well. So we're going to talk about them, and we're going to get into some details regarding the setup for severe weather. So you have an enhanced risk of severe thunderstorms across portions of Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana. That might be extended slightly northward into portions of Michigan as well, southern Michigan in particular. I would be surprised to see it put up in southeastern Michigan. And then the SBC is also mentioning the potential for a moderate risk across portions of the lower Ohio Valley. That would include southern Indiana, southern Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas. Those areas are likely to see or potentially could see an upgrade. Mainly because there's still questions with regards to prefrontal convection down in that region. But for our area, it's pretty certain that there's going to be some form of severe thunderstorms. The question is what exactly mode they'll be in. And the models are very inconsistent with regards to exactly how these will evolve and what type of severe hazards they will pose. There's some displacements in storm relative felicity in addition to displacement of CAPE in some places. So there's still some questions with the setup out there, which is why, again, slight risk still remains for portions of southern Michigan. So still some things to be trimmed out regarding these setups. I really think the threat is going to stay to the main threat's going to stay south of the Indiana border, might extend into southeastern Michigan, but I do think overall hazard is going to be more robust as you go further south with this potential. So that's not to say that there will not be all severe hazards potential in portions of southern Michigan. We'll take a look at some of the models to get an idea of how that's going to unfold in just a minute. But we need to fast forward. Okay, there's your 10% hatch risk for tornadoes. Again, that's for portions of the lower Ohio Valley once again. And you see the tornado risk for southern Michigan is still showing up as somewhat low according to the SPC. They're showing it for portions of southern Michigan as only 2%, and then it increases as you go further south into portions of Indiana and Ohio. So again, threat increases as you go south. Wind threat, though, is maximized across portions of Indiana, Ohio, and then I think probably even extending into southern Michigan later on as well. I think the damaging winds are going to be the primary threat with these storms as they move through. So hail threat also present, kind of in a similar situation. Hail is going to be a more robust hazard for some places particularly. There's going to be some pretty steep lapse rates out there, and there's going to be some pretty good potential for some large hailstones with these storms that develop in this pretty broad environment within the warm sector that's going to be coming with this mid-level trough making its way through. So what you got here is the CSU MLP model kind of doing a model output for a hazards zone, and you can see it's pretty similar to what is being shown for the day on Sunday. In this particular instance, you see that tornado threat, again, maximized lower Ohio Valley, hail threat maximized lower Ohio Valley, wind threat maximized lower Ohio Valley. But again, still showing up for portions of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio with the setup that is going to pull through. Now I want to go to the 6 panel for, actually before we do that, let's take a look at some of the future threats. There is potential that I will look for some storms tomorrow down in, we'll be in western North Carolina with Samaritan's Purse. But Asheville, North Carolina is under a slight risk for severe thunderstorms. And that, again, will pose an all-severe hazard risk. There might be 2 rounds of severe thunderstorms across this region, so that'll be something to keep watch out for. Now we need to shift to Wednesday. Wednesday is looking like the more robust threat. Again, particularly lower Ohio Valley still showing that main target area, but it looks like the northward shift is going to be more prominent for portions of southern Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, and I do think all severe hazards, again, once again possible across this region on Wednesday, going into Thursday. So it's going to be something you're going to want to watch out for in that region. We'll go into a few details about that, but we're going to focus Sunday because Sunday's the day that's actually really coming up and it's coming close. So if you look at the Wednesday all-severe threat for portions of the eastern United States, you can see that it is much more elevated in that particular region. There's a pretty good chance that there could be a decent setup for severe weather, even more than Sunday. So that's something we're going to want to watch carefully as this starts to unfold. Now, The mid-level will enhance evening into. Okay, you can see that potential for 60 knots at the mid-levels. So that's really the driving force, that mid-level trough that's making its way through, gonna fire off these storms. In addition to the instability out in front of it, the decent dew points that we're gonna have with this coming through as well. So that is going to be something we're going to want to watch out for as we go through this. But you can see Wednesday. Now, Wednesday even looks more pronounced in the mid-levels. You can see that very strong push of 70 to 80 knot southwesterlies in the mid-levels. And then as it progresses forward, you can see that that overspreads across portions of Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. That is showing the timing during the morning hours, which would not be ideal for the best severe weather potential. But again, by the afternoon, you can see it does overspread across much of the eastern United States. And if that does verify, we could be looking at widespread severe weather across portions of the eastern United States, including Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. Now, I know places in the Upper Peninsula have been dealing with cold air and an ice storm, a lot of ice accumulation up there. Again, that's due to the length of the warm sector that's rising up into this area. You got our stationary front that's sort of settling over that region, and you got pretty cold air that is on the northern flank of that stationary front as well. So that's a driving force with the freezing rain. But these systems will be entering a warm sector that will be conducive for severe weather development, which is why, again, there's a lot of messaging out there that these could be some decent setups for severe weather, and they would in fact be correct. Progressing forward, let's go to the HRRR. Okay, the HRRR model, we're going to take a look at the CAPE. Okay, instability is kind of a leading main piece that we need for severe weather to develop. And as we go into Sunday morning, you can see by the time we get to Sunday at 2 o'clock, you have instability spreading across much of Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. You can see the major amounts of instability, the larger amounts of instability are focused in that area that has the higher threat. But you can see that southern Michigan, Indiana, Ohio will about have 1,500, maybe even upwards up to 2,000 joules of CAPE. When I get a sounding out ahead of the storms that we'll be developing, you can see that SRH is really low. So with a lower SRH, again, if this continues with the 12Z model that's going to come out soon, that would lower the tornado potential across portions of Indiana and Michigan. Now, there's not to say that that's going to not increase, because it very well could. And we still have directional and speed shear present. So tornado potential is still possible with the system and these storms that come through. But it really looks like that it's going to be more along the lines of a damaging wind hail threat for portions of northern Indiana, northwest Ohio, southern Michigan, based on latest models. Now, if you looked at the models yesterday, it was screaming tornado potential. But again, as we get closer to the day, it does tend to factor in some different information that's coming in, especially as these systems move on land and then begin to make their approach into portions of eastern Michigan. So damaging winds and hail, again, are looking to be the primary threat as of now. It's not to say it's not going to change later on, but severe threat still showing up for western Ohio, eastern Indiana. And then that instability will make its way through, and then it'll weaken as we get into the overnight hours. Now, as we get into the evening hours, I'd say 6 p.m. afterwards, I am seeing that these systems will start to draw off some increased SRH. These storms making their way through. Look at that, tornado sounding. Your SRH increases over 100. Again, we like looking for that minimal SRH up to the first kilometer of about 150. And again, it's at 133, so it'll be increasing, but it'll tag on to some increased SRH. You'll still have that good instability out there. So I think as we get into northwestern Ohio, I think we'll start to see an increased tornado potential based on this HRRR model. Not to say that that's not going to change. Again, a lot of inconsistency with the models that are coming through. So that is something to keep in mind, that this will change as we get into a certain point. But surface-based CAPE is a key ingredient. Again, let's take a look at our SRH values. We're going to go to right here to the 3rd kilometer. Okay, so our SRH, as we get to the time frame of this event, will increase as we get to the afternoon hours across portions of Ohio. You can see that the SRH is sort of lacking in some places across portions of Indiana and Ohio during the early afternoon. So as we go into the evening hours, though, you can see the SRH does tend to increase and pick up. That's typical as we approach the evening hours, but you can see SRH does get stronger, and that will increase our tornado potential with the storms we move through. Good to keep in mind. Your instability or your dew points will increase, and you'll have dew points in the 60s across portions of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, and even increasing into portions of the mid-60s in Illinois, Missouri, and Kentucky. So your moisture content definitely gonna have it. So progress to the NAM. As you get to the NAM, again, the NAM likes to take things a little bit differently. It tends to be on the more intense side of things. So we're going to show what the NAM is depicting here. But you can see it does depict earlier initiation of storms across portions of eastern Illinois, although later in the day. Again, the NAM likes to shift things further to the west, but getting a sounding out ahead of the storms that form across portions of eastern Illinois. You got a nice tornado sounding that's being shown there with instability going all the way up to the higher levels of the atmosphere. Cape values of about 2,500, good 3 Cape, and decent SRH capable of producing tornadoes. So NAM likes to shift things west usually, typically. That's how it does things. And then it gets into the overnight hours, and as it gets to the overnight hours, it does show a weak, a relatively still decent environment for some tornadoes, even across portions of southern Michigan with Cape values of 1,500, SRH values of 200. So it increases the tornado threat across portions of southwest Michigan later on to the overnight hours. But if you look at the storm relativity, again, earlier here, we need to get to Sunday. Pressing forward. There we go. As we get into Monday evening, you can see that there's decent SRH across portions of southwest Michigan. So it does enhance, the NAM enhances the tornado threat just a little bit across portions of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. So again, Sunday is going to be a day where you're going to want to be watching for the latest alerts from the National Weather Service. It is going to be something that could potentially either have a decent setup for severe weather, or it could be one of those setups where it's like there is potential, it's present, but things that could influence it prior to the actual event happening could weaken the setup. So it's still some inconsistencies with the models, but things to consider for this upcoming threat for at least Michigan. Indiana, southern Indiana, pretty much is going to see severe weather. I wouldn't be surprised. So southern Indiana, definitely going to want to be watching carefully. Michigan, northern Indiana, northwest Ohio, watch the latest forecasts. I would consider that. I'll be back mid-April doing some chasing. But what the model's showing for the Euro for Sunday evening is showing mainly a convective line. If it turns into a convective line, that would really limit the tornado threat a little bit more. That's not to say there could not be embedded QLCS tornadoes, but it will likely still, again, like the HERS showing, more of a damaging wind, hail threat. So that's what the Euro's showing as we get into Wednesday. Wednesday's looking a little bit more hazardous, I would say, in terms of the supercell potential based on this model. Again, shows a couple possible waves of storms, but it does look to focus again across Indiana, southern Indiana regions, just like usual for it. Showing a nice tornado sounding as we go into Wednesday. But again, that's several days out. We can't really draw too many conclusions off that just yet, but looks like Michigan is kind of on that fine line to see, okay, will we see severe weather, will we not? I'm leaning more towards you'll see at least a few severe storms. Just depends on the positioning and the strength of these storms as they make their way through, which again, they are looking rather juicy at this current point. So, talking about them here, make sure to remain alert for the latest updates from the National Weather Service. Again, I will be gone this next week, so Michigan Storm Chasers, definitely check them out. Great Lakes Storm Chasing Network, they're going to have you covered during these next couple of events. But for after this upcoming week, make sure to subscribe and stay updated, and please be in prayer for our trip to North Carolina. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to rebuild some homes out there for some people and show people just the light of Christ in that as well. So excited to get out there with the crew that is going to be going down. So just keep that in, just keep us in your prayers, much appreciated. And also keep the people that will be affected by these storms in their prayers. Hopefully Samaritan's Purse will have opportunities to respond to those events as well. So thanks for watching, everybody. We will see you all later.